Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zada. I am Naska Zada, your host. This is a show for people who want the truth and desire to learn more about the Middle East. Here on Zada, we talk to experts as well as voices of ordinary people affected by the culture, religion, political conflicts of the region. On Zada, we want you to share your thoughts and ideologies so we can engage in an honest, civilized discussion. We hope to educate and give a voice to those who want to make a difference. I strongly urge you to reach out via social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Our next guest is CEO of Constellation company and also co-host of DisrupTV, best-selling at Harvard Business, speaker, author, Ray Wang. Welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot. Long time no see.
Thank you so much for joining us. My gosh, real resume, and you're always on television, and thank you for giving us time to do this interview. We're talking about the Middle East, and we're talking about technology, your passion. I want to start with latest trends, especially tech trends in the Middle East.
You know, there are a lot of trends that are out there, and what's really exciting is the fact that we've moved beyond the standard cloud and mobile and social. I think the Middle East is actually enjoying a renaissance, and this has been powered by the fact that the basic infrastructure, the investment, the realization that we are moving away from an energy economy and away from a services economy, but also to building tech economies. And so what this means is we've seen companies come in and build data centers. We've seen the rise of IoT and smart buildings play a big role. There's a lot of work in drone technology that's going on and being deployed in the Middle East, as well as what's happening in the world of AI and, of course, blockchain as we look at how financial systems are being recreated. But each of these technologies, there seems to be a lot of backing. There's a lot of startups. I think one of the interesting things people don't realize is that in the Middle East, there's like something like 16 to 17 major startups crossing past 100 million in valuation, from shopping to what's happening in smart cities to what's happening on the internet. But there's lots of opportunities that are happening in the MENA region.
Yes, and it's interesting you mentioned shopping. They love shopping in the Middle East. I've been there many times for business trips. And also Amazon last year emerged with their major online shopping, Al-Souk. And then they have that going on, and they're trying to make Middle East shopping experience online shopping, because it's right now it's only in Qatar, UAE, and Gulf countries, but eventually they want to take it to. I just read watching Iraqi television, and they were talking about how they want to bring online shopping to a country like Iraq, which been torn, with war and civil war, but it seems like it's like technologies even going to war zones, and they want to be part of this exciting experience.
It is. And the GCC regions have been a little bit more advanced because of the mobile networks. We're seeing a lot of investment in 5G, which is going to which is the next standard of wireless networks that allows for different levels of services. And speaking of Iraq, I mean, Nagnet is one of the top online networking and platforms that are going on. It's one of the big startups there. And so across the region, we're seeing different things. Like Qatar has like IB Tech, which is an urban point, which is really an education technology. If you go further to areas like Jordan has a ton of startups, right? Anything in fintech to education. You see Madfoot, Luminous. These are big tech companies. Egypt has a lot of stuff in the money side, in the education and networking and internet and even solar. If you look at Carm Solar, Vizita, Fari, these are all some major techs that are going on. And Palestine has some really cool stuff. You get stuff in Real Crow for information technology. We see media entertainment that's going on as well. When we talk about SOO, and then of course, we see YamSafer as well for retail. So there's lots of stuff happening. It's a very exciting region for tech. And I think a lot of folks are also seeing the power of the PE firms, VCs raising multi-billion-dollar funds to actually invest in those startups in the region. So lots of stuff going on.
Yes, Ray, I was surprised to see, you mentioned Jordan and Egypt. I was not surprised to see UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They've always been advanced in technology and new ideas and developing the countries, because there's never been a war in those countries, a physical war. Were you surprised to see Jordan and Egypt? Because we don't see that, but a lot of even entrepreneurs starting in those countries, especially when it comes to IT and technology.
I was, when I did a little bit of the research about 2 years back, trying to understand what the landscape looked like in the MENA region. And I was surprised that Egypt and Jordan had a lot. Most people, you're right, they think about, of course, Israel. They think about what's happening in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and of course, UAE has always been one of those leaders. But we also, it was neat to see that other startups are happening around the world. And I think within the region and beyond the GCC, there's lots of things that are bringing people together. And that's really the excitement. I mean, this was the intent of the internet, was to bring communities together, was to open up opportunities and promote different opportunities so that people can actually, really get to their, get to their dreams, create a startup, connect with people, improve marketplaces, improve health, improve education. That was the whole point of the future of the internet.
Mm-hmm. And that takes us to a question like Middle East, as you know from the news, going through a lot of war. You talking about Syria, still civil war going on, and international war going on there, if we say, and also Iraq trying to rebuild after all those civil wars and ISIS. They try to rebuild the country. You have also Egypt trying to do that, and many like Libya, and then you have, like you said, Palestine always, and Israel-Palestine having conflict, and there's always. Do you think, in your opinion, that technology and high tech can help rebuild a country like Syria? How can it be useful?
Technology is always a double-edged sword, right? It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, right? We see the information campaigns that are being used to stir up tensions and get people upset at each other. It even happens in Western countries like the US. But when we think about the good, though, there's a lot that can be done, right? How do we coordinate aid? How do we coordinate rebuilding, right? In a lot of these areas, to be able to provide telemedicine and healthcare in remote ways, right? Getting a mobile network up might be the first step, right? Being able to provide power would be the next step, right? Being able to make sure that people can then connect and access resources and services from global NGOs, right? Being able to just do a quick health check. Right. And then, of course, I mean, the piece that's really important is making sure that a generation that has not had a chance for education or has been disrupted by education has an opportunity to learn, trying to reskill, retrain folks, make them ready, give them opportunities. And then, of course, right, I mean, there's a lot of logistics and coordination that's still going to be required in these war-torn regions. How do we coordinate aid? How do we coordinate buildup? Those are going to be important factors. But technology plays a role in facilitating that communication, enabling communities to come together, creating opportunities for collaboration, and more importantly, providing real data, right? Understanding the stats, understanding how bad situations are on the ground, if there's human rights violations that occur, if there's atrocities being committed, there's at least a way to communicate that so that maybe the world takes notice or other people take action. So I think there's lots of opportunities with technology, but we also have to be very careful about how that communication is put out. And of course, there's going to be a lot of dissent and a lot of power grabbing, especially when you're in war-torn regions that are rebuilding. There's always opportunities for bad actors to come into play. And so hopefully people are vigilant in terms of watching for that and trained so that they know how to prevent that and allow these countries and allow these tribes and urban areas and cultures to thrive again.
Yes, Ray, you talked about your entrepreneur. You started your amazing company, and you're CEO of that company. I was reading on how young people in the Middle East, especially Jordan, Egypt, and I think it was Israel, Palestine, they start their own companies, and especially females, because I'm interested in that too, to see often we see in the mainstream media that Middle Eastern women, they don't have so much power compared to men, and there's so much talk about that. But I saw that technology, actually, when it comes to Middle East, women in Middle East, it's a lot easier to start their own company if it's online, if it's IT, if it's related to these new technologies, or as if developing an app, compared to like 5 years ago, for example, in the region. So it's very good news. I think it's amazing to see that in a region always in the news because of bad news. There's something wrong. Something went wrong. It's about. But still, it's very unfortunate because the mainstream media doesn't talk about that, doesn't focus on that a lot.
No, it's a great point. I think the mainstream media I mean, the problem is the way media is funded today. We are funding it based on trying to get people excited about something to click or to get active. But I think there is a lot of wonderful things. The beauty of startups and technology is entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs do not have to go through the traditional means of getting approval. They're not subject to regulations that are oppressive. They are able to actually freely go out and solicit from a wider pool and different sets of networks. And it disrupts the existing networks, right, of how business and commerce are done in countries. We've seen that in almost every scenario, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. Right. I mean, this empowers people. And so the best idea wins, capital flows closer to the best idea. And then, of course, being on the internet, you are less subject to, extortion, in the traditional sense. If you open up a restaurant or a small business or a shop.
You don't have to be
right?
physically out there. You're right. And it's a lot easier for them to do business.
We're going to go transparent.
Go ahead.
And it's very transparent. That's the other piece.
Absolutely. And then we're going to talk about China and Middle East. And China is getting a lot of business and power in the Middle East. Tell us about that. It's not in the news a lot for some reason. What's going on? Because we hear China in Africa, China in Latin America doing businesses and deals. What's going on in the Middle East?
Yeah, we are in the midst of a tectonic foreign policy and a global reshaping of overall policy. Part of the reason, a couple of factors. I think the first one is the fact that the U.S. is now the #1 producer of energy. The shale business has actually allowed the U.S. to go out and produce and be profitable at $50 a barrel, which is detriment to most of the oil-producing nations because they need to be about 70 to 75 to support their social requirements and their economic needs. And so with the U.S. now less dependent on oil, there is a belief and they're also seeing some evidence that the U.S. is less interested in Middle East affairs. The biggest consumer of oil and the biggest customer is China, of course, and they've been on a tear to secure resources. They've been securing natural resources. You've seen their Africa policy. You've seen their Belt and Road Initiative, which is what you're referring to. And it's basically they're basically trying to recreate the Marshall Plan, and they want to create a dependency on the yen, and they also want to create trade against the yen. And so they're basically following the policies that the U.S. has done for the last 20 to 30 years, but they're doing it in a way that countries have to be careful. You see uprisings in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and in other areas where money was loaned really to create debt situations. But for the Middle East, it's a little bit different. I think they're looking for the know-how, the ability to build infrastructure, the investment in technologies, the investment in 5G. So they run less of a risk in this Belt and Road Initiative of becoming a dependent nation and a port and an extension of China. But they do have to know that the reasons are all, of course, foreign policy is all about a collection of self-interests. I mean, people do realize that that's what's happening. And so over time, it'll be not just internet technologies, it'll not just be investment in infrastructure, but also investment in arms and defense. So we expect to see that from a foreign policy angle.
Ray Wang, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Thanks a lot. And congratulations on your new show.
Thank you so much.